Welcome to the finance section of today's grant workshop. I am Cindy McHugh. I was the 2020 president of Impact 100 Northwest Florida. Before that I was treasurer, and before that I worked on the finance committee. So my job here today is to explain to you how to put together the finance portions of your grant application. There are three major parts to that financially related. The first one, it comes with the letter of intent, something that we started new a couple of years ago. There's only two small financial statement pieces that go with it, but they're both very important. The first one is your 501c3 IRS acceptance letter as a nonprofit. The second one is your 10100 from the state of Florida. That is your license to solicit funds. Those two documents, those two financial documents, need to be attached to your letter of intent. If you don't have your Florida 10100 complete the application and send us a copy of your application, but we need to have that final letter before your grant submission. So those two things go with your letter of intent. That's the first thing that will happen. After your letter of intent is complete, you'll get an grant application. The grant committee will send you your grant application. And with that, there'll be two more parts that we need to talk about that are finances. The first part that go with it, with that grant application, is how to complete your budget, your project budget. That budget is going to have, again, here we go, three parts. The first part of that budget is the revenue section. How much does it cost? Very seldom does a project cost equal to what our grant will be. So we need a list of where your revenue comes from for your entire budget for that project. So if you've got other grants, if you've got monies in the bank, that'll all be listed in that first part. The total of that revenue has got to equal the total cost of your project. And that's the second part of that. The second part is your expenses. What's it going to cost to do this project? And it needs to be detailed. Any item on there that is more than $5,000 needs to have support. You can show estimates, quotes, anything that supports that, where you're going to buy it, who you're going to buy it from, how you're going to build it. All that information needs to be in that list of expenses. Revenue and expenses need to equal each other, total cost of the project, those two items. The third section is detail as to how much is going to be paid by the impact grant and which specific items in your list of expenses are going to be paid by your impact grant. Again, show the detail. Let us know exactly. Give us those estimates, those quotes. We need all that information. Three parts. Revenue, where the money's all coming from. Expenses, what the total cost of the grant's going to be, total cost of your project is going to be. And the third part is how much of that grant expense is going to be paid by our impact grant. Those are the first two parts that I wanted to talk to you about. The third part is a little bit more detailed, and that's all the required supporting documents. There'll be three places for you to put in PDFs. All your supporting documents need to come to us in the form of a PDF that you'll upload as an attachment to the grant. The first section is going to have some supporting documents that include the list of your board members, all the specific details, your cost estimates that I talked about, quotes and things like that. Some of these are going to overlap between the first and second section, but job descriptions, if you have salary included in there, what's the job description? Any added revenue, if you have revenue beyond, if you've got another grant, we want details of that, backup for that. All of that will be uploaded as an attachment. The second part would be more specific to the grant itself, not more general, but specific details of architectural drawings to go with a proposed building project, or your cost estimates, permits that you may have already gotten for building, letters from some of your collaborating partners. We don't want reference letters. We don't want publicity items. We want details supporting the project. If you have a new salary position or a new position that you're hiring, we want specifics as to how you're going to recruit that person, where you look for them, what their job will be, how you're going to support that job in the future beyond our grant. All of that will be in that second upload session. And the third upload session is very important. This is where all your financial statements are going to be. These are very detailed, and I want you to follow the grant application in order. They list in order. Our finance committee will be reviewing these statements, and having them in order is important to help them keep track and review your statements. So there's two different ways you can do it. If you have audited financial statements, there's 5 items that you'll need to add. The first one is your current year financial statements to date. So if the latest statement you have is to April, that's what we want. If you have May, if you have February, whatever your latest current year financial statements. We know they could be a partial year. We expect that they'll be a partial year, but we want those financial statements. Balance sheet and a profit and loss statement is all you need. The current year board approved operating budget. We want that. Second item. Because you are audited, this is for audited statements. If you're audited statements, 2 years audit reports and financial statements, profit and loss and balance sheet, past 2 years. So you're going to have 2 prior years plus a current year, partial year. Your 990, your tax returns for the past 2 years, those need to be included. And then the Form 10-100. If you have not added it to your letter of intent. If you have put it there, you don't need to include it again, but if you included just your application, we want that completed 10-100 acceptance with your grant application. There'll be a time lapse between that letter of intent and your actual application, and there should be enough time for the state of Florida to process that 10-100 request for you. If you do not have audited financial statements, there's a little bit longer list of things that you're going to need to provide for us and some answers to questions that would have been covered by your auditor's report. So those first 5 things were for audited statements. Now we'll do the unaudited statements. Again, please put these documents in order. Everything has to be uploaded in a PDF form. The current year internal financial statements, partial year, balance sheet, and profit and loss statement. The current bank statement and reconciliation that associates with that same. So if you've got April statements, April 30th statements, we want the April 30th bank statement and reconciliation that ties out the cash that are listed or savings that are listed. If you have more than one bank account, more than one bank statement, but just 1 month's worth that associates with that partial year financial statement that you're providing us. Again, your current year budget approved by your board. The unaudited financial statements that you would have had for the past 2 years, profit and loss and balance sheet. So again, 2 full fiscal years prior and 1 partial year is going to be included. Your 990 tax return for the last 2 years. Your Form 10-100, if you haven't attached it to the letter of intent, you want the final copy here. Then a copy, this is the additional stuff that you need if you're not an audited organization. You need a copy of your bylaws, the organization's bylaws. That's, again, in PDF format, copy of those bylaws. And then a brief narrative that has 2 questions answered. A description of your board governance. Tell us how frequently your board meets, how the minutes are maintained, how your organization operates, not just as a board, but then the second part of that, describe your financial policies. Who keeps the accounting records? Who cashes the checks? Who writes the checks? Who approves the checks? Who does your financial statements? How are donations recorded? Who handles those receipts, those cash receipts? Who reconciles your bank statement? All of your financial policies, a summary of those financial policies. If you could answer those two questions in that brief narrative, how your board governs, and how what your financial practices are. And the last thing is an answer to a question. It's a very specific question. Is the organization aware of any contingent liabilities? And if so, how would the organization meet these obligations? What's a contingent liability? A lawsuit that may be outstanding, a threatened lawsuit that may be outstanding, are two very common examples of a contingent liability. Something that you see in your future that may cost you funds and how you intend to handle those. Those things all, once again, need to be uploaded, attached to the grant in that section at the end of your grant application. They all need to be in PDFs. The financial statements need to be in the same order that we listed them. There'll be very specific instructions in the grant application for you. If you have any questions about it, your questions should be sent to grants@impactnwf.org. That's grants, GRANTS, at impactnwf.org. I know we're going to answer as many questions as we can today, but again, there's always going to be a question come up later, and I want you to send those questions to the grants email, and they will forward it to the appropriate finance representative. If you have submitted your grant and there's an additional document that you find after the fact and need to have it uploaded to your file, again, send it to that same grants application, grants@impactnwf email address. So I know that there's a lot of information here, and the financial statements and the financial information is a very important part of your grant application, and you're probably going to have questions. If you have questions that we didn't answer today, please email grants@impactnwf.org. That's grants@impactnwf.org. And they will be sure to get your questions to the appropriate financial representative, and you'll be able to get that answered. So thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your grant application.